A Shalom Akim Shalom Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquathim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Requai, and back in here with another quick and towards as always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I wanted to just discuss this idea of gratitude, and gratitude in the sense of maintaining a healthy, grateful mindset, even in the midst of uncomfortable situations, right? And sometimes, when we go through very uncomfortable situations, we how do I say this? We tend to forget a lot of the things that the Lord did for us, and then we tend to forget maybe even the stories too of the things that the Lord did for us, right? So it's really just to help maintain a healthy state of mind, especially in uncomfortable situations, right? Sometimes we go through certain situations and them being so uncomfortable, we lose sight of the things that we do have, and our flesh might tend to overly focus on the things that we don't have, right? So this is just try to bring our minds back into a sense of center stage, to keep in mind the things that we have, right? And essentially, hope, like we do, yes, sometimes we do hope for, things that, we might want, but not always might be beneficial at the time or whatnot, right? So the point really is that, maintaining a healthy gratitude mindset. So what do I mean when I say gratitude? Let me get the word in the etymology. Because sometimes in the midst of tribulation, sometimes in the midst of certain uncomfortable situations, as Paul described how, being abased and being abound, in moments when we're being abased, so to speak, we tend to forget a lot of the things that, that the Lord did for us, right? And, get into a kind of a complaining, type of spirit, right? So just something to be mindful of, as I'm making this lesson. I'm guilty, of doing that. I'm not saying that I'm free from this mindset, because we're still all in the flesh. As a matter of fact, let me get this first precept. Before I continue, just bear with me on this. Let me just look for it. This is Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 9, verse 15, and it says, "For the corruptible body presseth down the soul, and the earthly tabernacle weighed down the mind, that museth upon many things," right? So this is part of, being part of this fleshly, earthly tabernacle that we're in. We tend to kind of like drift on into things that would actually want to comfort, essentially, our flesh. Whether it's freedom to have more money, you know, companionship, sex, being able to, what I'm saying, like, those kinds of like fleshly things, right? Or food or whatever it is, trying different foods or whatever. These are the things that the earthly tabernacle is constantly, thinking about these things, right? Then we forget the things that the Lord forgot. I'm sorry, the Lord did for us, right? So let me get the word gratitude very quick, and it says thankfulness grateful, from the Latin gratus. So that's where you get the Spanish word gracias, right? Basically means like thanks, right? Or it says thankful, pleasing, to favor, thankfulness. Let me see if there's a little bit more here. Just bear with me. So it also says down here, grace, favor, esteem, gratitude, goodwill, pleasing quality, right? So, and the scriptures say that we are saved through grace, through faith, but not of ourselves. It's a gift from the Most High, Yahweh Bashim Shai, right? So we didn't, a gift is something that is given to you. It's not something that you essentially you give yourself, right? So let me just go, and I just wanted to read this little story here real quick. And Lord's will that this lesson will be edifying, right? So this is Numbers chapter 11, verse 1, and it says, "And the people complained, and it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled. And the fire of the Lord Yahweh burnt among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp." And it says in verse 2, "And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord Yahweh, the fire was quenched. And he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. And the mixed multitude was among them, fell a lusting. And the children of Israel also wept again, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish, we remember we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers, and the melons, and the leeks, and the onions, and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes," right? So, they're reminiscing on the times in Egypt where they were going down and they had, free reign. They had, it was accessible. They had the fish, they had the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, all that, goody stuff. And you realize a lot of their complaints was from something that the flesh was desiring. It wasn't something that the spirit really was desiring, right? And when you think about it and you kind of equate it to your own, things that, we feel in the flesh, one of the things that, we might complain about, comes from, the flesh wanting certain things, not necessarily what the spirit actually wants, right? That's why Yahweh Shai said, man should live by bread alone. Man should not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the Most High, right? So, it says, verse 6, and it says, "When our soul is dried away, there is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes. And the manna was as coriander seed. The color thereof was the color of bdellium. And the people went out and gathered it and ground it in the mills and beat it into a mortar." So these are like little instruments that you might use to basically change the shape of the manna, right? These are like, I believe it's like a grinding instrument. Let me just look that up real quick. I know it normally comes with a pestle, mortar. Just 1 second. Right, so yeah, so it's like a culinary tool basically. It looks like a cup, and what you would do, you put that whatever it is in there. You could put like dried herbs or whatever, and you grind it, right? So that's what we were doing, in the wilderness. But as you're reading this, like, remember to keep in mind that they're reminiscing on something from Egypt, that they had access to all those different things, right? And now they don't have access to those same things anymore. But here's the kicker. When you read down where it describes the manna, it's not like they had no food to eat. It's just that they had, I don't want to say limited, but they still had food to eat, right? And when you think about it also, and I'm me speaking, I'm guilty of this. I'm guilty of, having access to something, and then your mind's like thinking about, man, I want to be able to, access that again, right? You know what I'm saying? So the point is, the our people, we lost a certain sense of gratitude, because it's not like they were in the wilderness and they did not have no food to eat at all. They still had something to eat here. And the manna, when you go into wisdom, as a matter of fact, let me get that right now, actually. I'm going to get it in the GNT because I think it reads a little bit more interesting, because I wanted to kind of touch on the point about the manna. So they still had food to eat. That's the point, right? So let me just get this in Wisdom of Solomon. Just bear with me on this. I just wanted to raise a point real quick about the manna. Okay, this is Wisdom of Solomon 16, verse 20. And it says in the GNT, and it says, "But this disaster did not strike your people. Instead, you gave them the food of the angels from heaven. You sent down bread that was ready to eat, and they did not have to prepare it. The food you gave delighted everyone, no matter what his taste." It says in verse 21, "And all this showed how lovingly you care for your children. The food satisfied the desire of everyone who ate it, and was changed to suit every person's taste." Right? So it was basically designed to suit the needs of every person, right? Of every Israelite. But, our people's mindset, their flesh, they were like so caught up in like, man, the leeks, man. Oh my goodness, the melons, man. Oh my goodness, the onions, the garlic. They were reminiscing about those days, right? And then they forget about how hardcore, uncomfortable those different that situation in Egypt was. How rigorous the slavery was. But their flesh was desiring those things because there was a change of an environment. They didn't have the pleasures and the freedom, the luxury as much as they used to, right? So their flesh is, they're complaining. Complaining really truly, as I thought about this, really comes from things in the flesh, for desiring a lot of these things, right? And that's where a lot of our people's complaints came from. It wasn't something of essentially the spirit, right? So let me read down a little bit. I'll read down to verse 9, and it says, "And the people went about and gathered it and ground it into mills and beat it in the mortar and baked it in pans and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was the taste of fresh oil. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it." Right? So in this situation, you have a lot of our, we were very, very being ungrateful, and this is something, just to, constantly keep in mind, just to, kind of bring things back into perspective, right? Because when you really look at it, man, we really do, have a lot, right? You have the Lord's name, the Son's name, and a lot of these things sometimes we forget, how important these things are, right? Especially in these times when you look at the countenance of people, and you listen to a lot of these podcasters and so on and so forth. Like when you listen to these people, they don't have like Kanye said in his interview years ago, these people don't have the answers, right? To be able to understand what's going on in the world and be able to link it to the scriptures, we tend to forget a lot of these, things, right? So this is just a healthy exhortation just to bring forth a mindset of remembering to be, thankful, because, it could have been like, you look at a lot of these, we could have had like a YN spirit on us, man. We could have been, for sisters listening, you could have been a whole ass, Cardi B out there. You know what I'm saying? Let me go to Sirach. Just bear with me. Let me just look for this. Ecclesiasticus. This is Sirach chapter 11, verse 25, and it says, "In the day of prosperity, there is a forgetfulness of affliction, and in the day of affliction, there is no remembrance of prosperity. For it is an easy thing unto the Lord, Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, in the day of death to reward a man according to his ways," right? So it shows you, a lot of our people forgot. They forgot about the affliction, in that situation, and it shows you that remaining thankful, it just helps you to kind of put you in a state of remembering the good things the Lord did for us, right? So let me go to Philippians here. This is Philippians 4 and 6, and it says, "Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known unto the Most High, Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai." And it says, "Then the peace of the Most High, with passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Hamashiach Yahushai." Verse 8, "Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are a good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things." So, these things, prayer and supplication, it helps to kind of, just remember your gratitude, right? I think the apostle, I believe it's Rakad, it always talks about, pray, thank the Lord, you woke up another day. And as a matter of fact, another thing, in keeping things also in perspective, in accordance to what's going on in these times, pray over your household, pray before you leave your house, thank the Lord, that you make it to, your plantation safe, and thank the Lord and you make it home safe. Because a lot of these, when you look at a lot of these people, especially this guy that got, that got so-called taken out by a stray bullet, in the university recently, he ain't going home. He going up to the upper room. You know what I'm saying? So just good exhortation to keep these things in mind. As a matter of fact, I guess I'll end off with that precept here, right? Because there's a lot to be, thankful for, especially in the midst of tribulation, right? Don't want to lose that, just because we're in a situation that's uncomfortable. This is, I think that's Psalms. This is Psalms 121, verse 7, and it says, "The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore, right? So you leave the house, thank the Lord before you leave the house, you come back home, thank the Lord you made it back home safe, right? Because these times are evil, right? So anyways, that's just a little bit of exhortation in regards to gratitude, just keeping things, that healthy perspective, that healthy in our minds, as we go through, navigate these times, especially when you go through moments where you're basically abased, right? You don't want to feel like, man, because you just, your flesh will be lusting for a lot of these things that you might have so-called lost, right? But it's only temporary, right? These things, it's also to build character. It's also to bring out certain other attributes that can actually help you to develop, what I'm saying? So um it's this is a lot to be thankful for, what I'm saying? So anyways, I'll leave the lesson there. But Lord's will, as always, this lesson was edifying. I just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Until next time, I say Shalom.